Welcome to our discussion of ethics. We're going to skip around a little bit. I want to discuss chapter 16, which is employees and the corporation. Very important. The key learning objectives on slide 2 is understanding workers' rights to organize unions and bargain collectively, knowing how government regulations assure occupational safety and health, and what businesses must do to protect employees, evaluating the limits of employers' duty to provide job security for their workers, appraising the extent of employees' right to privacy when business monitors employee communications, police romance in the office, which is always an issue, tests for drugs or alcohol, which is going to be an issue now with legalized pot, or subject employees to honesty tests. Subjecting employees to honesty tests. Debating if employees have a duty to blow the whistle on corporate misconduct, or if employees should always be loyal to their employers. Assessing the obligation of transnational corporations to their employees around the world. And I want to throw one into the mix. If employees voice their opinion on social media and that opinion is something that the organization doesn't deal with, that's going to be an issue with termination of employees. The employment relationship, slide 3. Employees are an important market stakeholder group. Employees are responsible for carrying out the work of the company. At the same time, employees are dependent on the company for their livelihood. The nature of the employment relationship conveys rights and duties on both sides. 16.1. Slide number 4, rights and duties of employees and employers. Employee right, employer duties. Right to organize and bargain. Right to a safe and healthy workplace. That's what OSHA is for. Right to privacy. Duty to discipline fairly and justly. Right to blow the whistle. Right to equal employment opportunity. Right to be treated with respect for fundamental human rights. Continued. Employee duties, employee rights. No drug or alcohol abuse. No action that would endanger others. Treat others with respect and without harassment of any kind. Honesty, appropriate disclosure, loyalty and commitment, respect for employees' property and intellectual capital. We now move on to slide 5, workplace rights. Employees in the U.S. enjoy important legal guarantees. They have the right to organize and bargain collectively, have a safe and healthy workplace, and to some degree job security. However, if you're not a part of a union, you do not have these rights. In New York State is an employment at will. They could fire a person for any reason, and they do not have to explain their reasons to the employees. And the only way an employee could really seek recourse is if they feel that they've been discriminated against. That is very difficult to prove unless the employee was really negligent. Slide 6 in chapter 16, right to organize and bargain collectively. In the U.S. and in most other nations, employees have a fundamental legal right to organize labor unions and to bargain collectively with employers. Workers have a right to hold an election to decide which union will represent them. Labor unions have the right to negotiate wages, working conditions, and other terms of employment. Slide 7, right to organize and bargain collectively. Influence of labor unions has varied during the periods in U.S. history. During the 1930s, New Deal period unions were very popular. Since the mid-50s, there has been a decline in union membership. In 2011, only about 12% of all U.S. workers were members of a labor union. The percentage was higher, 37% in government employment. In the wake of the Great Recession, elected officials in several states sought to weaken unions by limiting the rights of public sector workers. Some unions have departed from adversarial approach to work cooperatively with management. For example, Kaiser Permanente. Slide 8, right to safe and healthy workplace. Annually, more than 3 million workers in private industry are injured or become ill while on the job, according to the U.S. Department of Labor. Occupational Safety and Health Act, passed in 1970, gives workers the right to a job free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm. This law is administered by the Occupational Health and Safety Administration, otherwise known as OSHA. Since the agency's creation in 1970, the overall workplace death rate has been halved. Slide 9, right to safe and healthy workplace. Working conditions remain very dangerous in many developing countries. For example, in 2010, an electrical fire at a sportswear factory in Dhaka, Bangladesh, killed 29 employees and injured more than 100 more, many of whom had jumped from upper-story windows to escape the flames. Unfortunately, very much reminiscent of 9/11. Managers had intentionally blocked exits to prevent theft and had not conducted fire safety drills. In 2012, PVH Corporation, the parent of such brands as Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein, DKNY, partnered with a group of NGOs and trade unions to provide worker training and push for stronger government enforcement of safety laws. Slide number 10, the right to a secure job. In the U.S., since the late 1800s, the legal basis for employment relationship has been employment at will. Employment at will is a legal doctrine that means employees are hired and retained at their jobs at will of, i.e., at the sole discretion of the employer. The Equal Employment and other laws prevent discriminatory termination, as well as those that would constitute a violation of public policy. But again, it's very difficult to prove discrimination, and you would have to hire a lawyer. And unless you have money or somebody does it pro bono, it's a very difficult thing to do. Slide 11, the right to a secure job. The commitments that employers and employees make to each other go beyond mere legal obligations. Cultural values, traditions, and norms of behavior also play important roles. The term social contract refers to the implied understanding between an organization and its stakeholders. This is not a legal contract, but rather a set of shared expectations. Should companies have a strong or weak bond with their employees? Discuss that amongst yourselves. I believe they should, because that will lead to loyalty, which will lead to a better bottom line. Slide 12, privacy in the workplace. An important right in the workplace, as elsewhere, is privacy. In the business context, privacy rights refer to the primarily protecting an individual's personal life from an unwarranted intrusion by the employer. Key workplace issues where privacy dilemmas often emerge include electronic monitoring, office romance, drug and alcohol use, and honesty testing, in other words, polygraphs. Slide 13, privacy in the workplace. Electronic monitoring. New technologies enable companies to gather, store, and monitor information about employees' activities. A company's need for information, particularly about its workers, may be at odds with an employee's right to privacy. Management justifies the increase in employee monitoring for a number of reasons. Employee efficiency, fear of lawsuits if employees act inappropriately. Slide 14, privacy in the workplace. Office romance requires careful balancing between legitimate employee concerns and employee privacy. A 2011 survey showed that 38% of workers said they had dated a coworker at least once during their careers, and of these relationships, almost a third had led to marriage. Today, most companies try to manage office relationships rather than ban them outright. Sometimes a consensual relationship agreement are required to protect against possible harassment lawsuits if the people involved later break up. Slide 15, privacy in the workplace. Drug and alcohol testing. Drug abuse costs of U.S. industry and taxpayers are estimated at $181 billion a year. Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988 required federal contractors to establish and maintain a workplace free of drugs and alcohol. About 2/3 of the companies test employees or job applicants for illegal substances, according to a 2011 study. Drug testing is typically used on 3 different occasions: pre-employment screening, random testing of employees, and testing for cause. And this will be a big issue now that many states are now allowing the use of recreational marijuana. Figure 16.2, slide 16, pros and cons of employee drug testing. Let's just look at 1 or 2 on each side. Arguments favoring drug testing: supports U.S. policy to reduce illegal drug use and availability. People are going to be afraid of losing their job. They're not going to be using as much drugs. Promotes safety in the workplace. Some of the cons: invades an employee's privacy and lowers employee morale, which is never good. Slide number 17, privacy in the workplace continued. Alcohol use and addiction causes twice the problems of an illegal drug combined. About 9% of full-time employees are heavy drinkers. About 40% of all industrial fatalities and 47% of industrial injuries are linked to alcohol. U.S. businesses lose an estimated $88 billion per year in reduced productivity directly related to alcohol abuse. Employee assistance programs, EAPs, offer counseling, rehabilitation programs, and follow-up. Slide 18, privacy in the workplace. Employee theft and honesty testing. Employee theft has emerged as a significant economic, social, and ethical problem in the workplace. Employee Polygraph Protection Act of 1988. Severely limited polygraph testing for employers are prohibited. Approximately 85% of all such tests previously administered in the U.S. So it's very important in the sense that it helps buttress employee privacy. Although controversial, many companies have switched to written psychological tests. Whistleblowing, slide 19, and free speech in the workplace. Free speech in the workplace, another area where employer and employee rights and duties sometimes conflict. The U.S. Constitution protects free speech. However, it does not specifically protect freedom of expression in the workplace. So if you post something nasty, politically nasty statement on Facebook, it can get you fired. I know of such a case. U.S. Constitution protects free speech, however, does not apply to the workplace necessarily. Again, I have to repeat that because it's so scary out there with social media. You need to be very careful. Employees are not generally allowed to speak out against their employers due to legitimate interests of the business. When society's interests override those of the individual's business, employee may feel the need to speak out or blow the whistle. That concludes slide 19. Slide 20. Whistleblowing continued. Whistleblowing with an employee is when an employee believes his or her employer has done something wrong and illegal or harmful to the public, and he or she reports their alleged misconduct to the media, government, or high-level company officials. 4 conditions must be satisfied to justify whistleblowing. Number 1, organization is doing or will do something that seriously harms others. Employee has tried and failed to resolve the problem internally. Reporting the problem publicly will probably stop or prevent the harm, and the harm is serious enough to justify the probable costs of disclosure to the whistleblower. Working conditions around the world, slide 21. Laws and practices that establish fair wages, acceptable working conditions, and employee rights vary greatly around the world. One very public issue is sweatshops. Factories where employees, sometimes including children, are forced to work long hours at low wages, often under unsafe working conditions. Number of well-known companies have been criticized for this: Nike, Walmart, Disney, and McDonald's. Slide 22, fair labor standards. Labor standards refer to the conditions under which a company's employees or the employees of its suppliers, subcontractors, or others in its commercial chain work. Universal rules and standards related to these are called fair labor standards. Slide 23, fair labor standards. In the face of growing concern over working conditions overseas, a debate has developed over how to best establish fair labor standards for multinational corporations. Voluntary corporate codes of conduct, non-governmental organizational labor codes, and industry-wide labor codes. Whatever the approach is, certain common questions emerge in any attempt to define and enforce fair labor standards. Common questions are: what wage level is fair? Should the market set the standards? Do multinationals have a responsibility to provide a wage that supports decent standards of living? Should standards apply to just the firm's own employees or all workers having a hand in making the product? Responsibility of the firm to its own employees is clear. Responsibility to subcontractors' employees is indirect and unclear. Finally, how should labor standards be enforced? Who should be responsible for monitoring, the company or an independent body? Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.